What's the best thing about being Robert Redford?
It gives you the kind of power to do the things you want to do in your life.
For decades, Robert Redford wasn't just admired, he was straight up adored. That golden smile, the windswept hair, the laid-back confidence, it all looked perfectly built for the big screen. To the public, he was the definition of Hollywood magic, a man who made everything look effortless. But behind the red carpets, flashing cameras, and legendary roles, there was a deeply personal truth hiding in plain sight. Behind the fame and iconic performances lived a secret that had nothing to do with box office numbers or awards. Redford didn't just experience Hollywood glamour. He carried a love story he never fully shared with the world, one that quietly guided his decisions, fueled his heartbreak, and shaped the legacy he spent a lifetime building. Now at 88, the legendary actor has finally opened up, and what he reveals about the woman who left a permanent mark on his heart hits harder than any script he ever brought to life. So who was she, and why did he keep her memory locked away for so long? The answer traces back to a beginning nobody ever saw coming. Before the Oscars, before activism, and long before the Sundance Film Festival, Robert Redford was just a shy, rebellious kid growing up in a modest Santa Monica neighborhood. No glitz, no shortcuts, no industry favors waiting for him. His father was a quiet, hard-working accountant who kept his head down, while his mother, warm, patient, and deeply caring, was the emotional anchor of the family. They weren't rich, didn't know Hollywood insiders, and nobody back then would have guessed their restless son was destined for greatness. School never clicked for him, not even a little. Structure felt suffocating, rules felt pointless, and lectures couldn't hold his attention. What lit him up instead were things that let his imagination breathe: art, sketching, baseball, and tennis. He later admitted he wasn't a great student, but that wasn't the full story. The truth was simple. He wasn't built for boxes or labels. When left alone, he thrived. On the tennis court, he was electric. He showed so much promise that he practiced alongside Pancho Gonzalez, one of the greatest players to ever touch the game. But while he shined with a racket in hand, the classroom was another story. After enrolling at the University of Colorado, things started slipping fast. His growing struggle with alcohol cost him everything. His scholarship disappeared, his enrollment ended, and just like that, he was out. He was embarrassed, drifting, and unsure where life was headed next. For most people, that would have been the breaking point. But Redford didn't freeze up. He moved forward because the next chapter would change everything. What followed took him far from home and straight toward the woman who would change his life forever. Paris, Rome, Madrid. Redford wandered through Europe with only a sketchbook, a few francs, and zero real plan. He slept in cheap hostels, drew in train stations, and soaked in the raw energy of every city he touched. He wasn't chasing fame or money, he was chasing answers. He once said that, "You sometimes need to be completely lost to figure out who you really are." And in those chaotic European streets, he slowly rebuilt himself. When he finally returned to the US, Hollywood still wasn't the move. Instead, he headed to New York and enrolled at the Pratt Institute to study painting, setting the stage for everything that came next. The work was quiet, lonely, and deeply focused. Hours alone, paint on canvas, thoughts running wild. It was perfect for a man still carrying old pain, still healing from scars nobody could see, but deep down, something inside him started pushing harder. Painting wasn't enough anymore. He needed to express himself with his voice, his body, his presence. That's when acting slid into his life, not as some grand plan, but like a calling he couldn't ignore. He enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and went all in without looking back. No safety net, no guarantees, just raw effort and hunger. There were no flashy roles waiting, no cameras chasing him down, just small stages, endless rehearsals, rejection after rejection, and a serious grind to master the craft. Still, he stayed locked in, learning every lesson the hard way. Then something unexpected changed everything. In the late 1950s, he met a young woman named Lola van Wagenen. She was calm where he was restless, steady where he felt scattered. While his mind raced nonstop, hers stayed grounded and clear. She brought balance into a life that had been nothing but chaos. Lola came from a quiet, conservative town, Provo, Utah, and practiced the Mormon faith. She carried a quiet strength that cut straight through his noise. Against all odds, two completely different worlds crashed together, and the spark was instant. Real, intense, and impossible to ignore. So strong, in fact, that they eloped in 1958, brushing past family concerns and jumping headfirst into a life together. But just as their love story started to bloom, tragedy hit fast and without warning. A loss so heavy it left a scar that never faded. Nothing prepares you for losing a child. Nothing. Not even the strongest love can protect you from that kind of heartbreak. Robert Redford and Lola Van Wagenen's first son, Scott, passed away from sudden infant death syndrome. He was only 2 months old. One moment filled with hope, the next swallowed by silence. The grief was overwhelming, the kind that knocks the wind out of you and changes how time feels. Redford later admitted the pain never fully left him. It followed him quietly, shaping his choices and the man he became. But instead of breaking them apart, the tragedy pulled them closer together. Lola didn't turn away from his grief. She stood right in it with him. She became his anchor, his steady ground, the one person who believed in his talent when he doubted himself the most. When life felt unstable and heavy, Lola was his shelter. Slowly, brick by brick, they rebuilt their life. And as that happened, Redford's long-shot dream started gaining traction. In 1963, his big break finally landed on Broadway in Barefoot in the Park, a Neil Simon play that put his charm and sharp timing on full display. The performance lit up the stage. Suddenly, Hollywood wasn't just a fantasy anymore, it was calling. Television roles followed fast. The Twilight Zone, Perry Mason. Each appearance sharpened his screen presence and built momentum. Then came Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. That movie didn't just make Redford famous, it made him iconic, the heartthrob, the golden face of a new Hollywood era. But as the spotlight grew brighter and the world fell hard for Robert Redford, cracks quietly began forming at home. Fame, pressure, regret, and the first subtle signs that the marriage built before the spotlight was starting to strain. As Redford's fame exploded, the balance he once relied on started slipping fast. Movie sets replaced quiet dinners, premieres replaced private moments, and the demands of Hollywood began crowding out everything else. He was suddenly everywhere: magazine covers, award shows, film shoots that pulled him away for months at a time. The world saw a rising legend, but at home the distance was growing louder by the day. Lola had always been his foundation, the steady force that held their world together. But fame doesn't ask for permission. It takes. Long absences, non-stop pressure, and the constant attention started weighing heavy on their marriage. Redford was chasing purpose and meaning through his work, while Lola was holding down reality, raising their growing family, and protecting a sense of normalcy that Hollywood didn't care about. They welcomed 3 more children, and with each new responsibility, the cracks became harder to ignore. Redford loved his family deeply, but he struggled to slow down. Success brought opportunity after opportunity, and saying no felt impossible. Every new role promised relevance, impact, and escape, but it also pulled him further from the life he once built with intention. Behind closed doors, the tension was real. Not explosive, not dramatic, but quiet and heavy. The kind that sits in the room even when nobody speaks. Lola remained composed, thoughtful, and strong, but the emotional gap kept widening. They weren't fighting. They were drifting, and sometimes that hurts even more. By the late 1970s, the truth could no longer be avoided. After 27 years of marriage, Robert Redford and Lola Van Wagenen made the painful decision to separate. There was no scandal, no public blowup, no messy headlines screaming betrayal. Just 2 people recognizing that the life they once shared had changed beyond repair. The divorce finalized in 1985, marking the end of a chapter that shaped Redford more than any role ever could. He didn't talk about it much, but those close to him noticed the shift. The charm was still there, the success kept rolling, but something quieter had settled in. A sense of reflection, maybe even regret. Not long after, Redford found love again with artist Sabine Zagars. Their connection was different, more private, more measured. She understood his need for space, nature, and solitude. Together, they built a life away from the Hollywood noise, eventually marrying in 2009. On the surface, it looked like peace had finally arrived. But here's the part that stayed buried for decades. Even as he moved forward, Redford never erased the past. Lola wasn't just his first wife, she was the woman who stood beside him before fame rewrote everything. The one who held him together through unimaginable loss, believed in him before the world did, and helped shape the man behind the legend. Friends would later say he carried that history quietly. No bitterness, no public confessions, just deep respect and unspoken gratitude. And now, with age bringing clarity, Redford has finally allowed that truth to surface. Because some love stories don't fade with time, they settle into the soul, and no matter how far life takes you, the people who knew you before the spotlight never truly leave you. By the late 1960s, Robert Redford wasn't just famous. He was unstoppable, a full-blown movie star with crowds screaming his name and studios lining up to lock him in. Everywhere he went, cameras flashed and opportunities poured in non-stop. But while Hollywood was celebrating, things at home were quietly falling apart. He was constantly gone on film sets, press tours, and long shoots that pulled him further away each time. Meanwhile, Lola was holding everything together back home, raising their 3 surviving children: Shauna, David, later known as James, and Amy. She carried the weight of daily life while his career kept racing forward. Years later, Robert admitted something that stuck with him hard. He regretted not choosing his family more often. He was driven, ambitious, and hungry for purpose, maybe too hungry, but through all the chaos, Lola stayed solid. She wasn't just his wife, she was his muse, his sounding board, and the quiet force behind one of the most powerful careers Hollywood had ever seen. She stood by him even as he took a massive risk launching the Sundance Film Festival. At the time, it was a bold move that many doubted. But Lola believed in the vision, supporting him as he helped reshape independent film forever. Still, once cracks form, they don't just disappear. By 1985, after 27 years of marriage, Robert and Lola faced the hardest choice of all. Their separation wasn't loud or messy. No dramatic headlines, no public fights, no bitter courtroom drama. It ended quietly, almost painfully so. Just 2 people worn down by years of slowly drifting apart. Love as deep as theirs couldn't bridge the emotional distance that had crept in over time. There was no villain, no betrayal, no scandal to point fingers at. Just a heavy sense of inevitability. And yet, even after the divorce papers were signed, Robert Redford never stopped calling Lola the love of his life. That wasn't just nostalgia talking, it was something carved deep into who he was. She knew him before the fame, before the chaos, before Hollywood rewrote the rules. That kind of love doesn't vanish, it just moves to a quieter place. After the divorce, Redford threw himself into work like never before. Film after film, project after project, he stayed busy, productive, and creatively alive. But behind the awards and applause, his personal life shifted in a completely different direction. In 1987, he began dating Brazilian actress Sonia Braga. She was bold, fiery, and completely unfiltered. Her confidence lit up every room she stepped into. She challenged him, matched his intensity, and pulled him out of his usual reserved lane. When they appeared together at the Cannes Film Festival, the flashbulbs went wild. Fans and tabloids couldn't get enough of the golden-haired Hollywood legend paired with the magnetic Brazilian star. The energy was real, but it burned too hot, too fast. Within a year, the relationship came to an end. And just as Redford started recovering from that intense chapter, something unexpected quietly started forming. It happened during the filming of Havana in 1990. That's when Robert Redford crossed paths with Swedish actress Lena Olin. At first, it looked like a standard professional pairing, 2 experienced actors doing their job. But it didn't take long before something deeper began to surface. This wasn't just chemistry for the camera, there was a spark building beneath the surface, one that would take him completely by surprise. Lena wasn't just another co-star, she was impossible to overlook. Intelligent, poised, and carrying a quiet fire in her eyes that pulled Redford in without warning. From the moment they shared the screen, the chemistry was undeniable. It crackled through every scene, but what happened off-camera told an even louder story. Conversations spilled deep into the night. Looks lingered longer than any script ever called for. And then came that one moment, a kiss during a late-night shoot that didn't feel planned at all. It wasn't acting. It wasn't rehearsed. It felt real, raw, and completely unguarded. Their connection unfolded quietly, far from cameras and screaming headlines. For nearly a year, they built something private, rooted in creativity, shared vulnerability, and genuine admiration. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it felt meaningful in a way Redford hadn't experienced in a long time. Lena saw the version of him most people never did. Not the movie star, not the icon, but the thoughtful artist beneath it all. The man still carrying old wounds, still wrestling with memories that never fully faded. For a while, it felt like a second chance. Like maybe, just maybe, he had found someone who truly met him where he was. But by 1991, that chapter quietly closed. No drama, no scandal, no ugly fallout. The relationship ended gently. Yet it left behind a familiar ache that settled deep. Once again, Redford found himself alone, staring down the same unanswered question. Was he searching for new love, or running from the memory of the one love he never truly let go of? That quiet love that shaped everything? As the 1990s rolled in, something shifted. Robert Redford began pulling back from the public eye when it came to romance. The whirlwind relationships, red carpet moments, and tabloid buzz slowly disappeared. To the outside world, it looked like retreat, but behind the scenes, something calmer and more meaningful was forming. That's when he met Kathy O'Connor, a talented costume designer who lived far from the spotlight of Hollywood fame. She was younger, grounded, and completely uninterested in the noise that followed him everywhere. Kathy wasn't impressed by legacy or star power. She saw the man, not the myth. She was simply present, steady, genuine, uncomplicated. And that presence hit him in a way he hadn't expected. It was something he didn't even realize he needed until it was right in front of him. Their relationship stayed intentionally quiet. No magazine covers, no paparazzi chases, no staged appearances. It was private by design and deeply stabilizing for a man who had grown tired of love tangled up in fame. While audiences obsessed over his on-screen chemistry and up-close and personal and the Horse Whisperer, his real love story was unfolding quietly. Late dinners, long talks, shared silence, all far away from flashing cameras and public expectations. For the first time in years, Redford wasn't chasing anything. Not validation, not romance, not approval. He was choosing peace. But even as Kathy brought calm into his life, something else hovered just beyond the edge of his story. Someone unexpected, a presence that would arrive quietly and change everything he thought he understood about love, loss, and what home truly means. Redford believed he already knew those lessons, but life wasn't finished teaching him yet. That quiet presence finally revealed itself in a way nobody expected. Without headlines, without hype, and without spectacle, Robert Redford's life shifted again. This time it wasn't fast or fiery. It was slow, grounded, and deeply intentional. The woman who stepped into that space was Sibylle Zegars, a German-born artist whose world couldn't have been further from Hollywood chaos. She wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't impressed by red carpets or box office numbers. Sibylle lived through creativity, nature, and introspection. Her art focused on the environment, emotion, and stillness, things Redford had been craving more than applause. Their connection grew quietly, rooted in long conversations, shared values, and a mutual respect for solitude. Unlike past romances, there was no rush, no public debut, no flashy appearances designed to feed curiosity. What they built unfolded far from the noise, often surrounded by mountains, open skies, and silence that felt healing rather than empty. For Redford, it felt like finally exhaling after decades of holding his breath. Friends noticed the change immediately. He seemed calmer, more centered, less pulled apart by expectation. The man who once ran from one project to the next now chose moments over momentum. Sibylle didn't try to fix him or rewrite his past. She accepted it. That acceptance hit deeper than any grand declaration ever could. For years, they kept their relationship almost invisible, no interviews explaining it, no public commentary feeding speculation, and that was the point. This wasn't a chapter meant for public consumption. It was something sacred, something protected. In 2009, after more than a decade together, Robert Redford and Sibylle Zegars quietly married. No spectacle, no Hollywood parade, just a private commitment built on trust, patience, and emotional honesty. At a stage in life where many people stop believing in love, Redford chose it, on his own terms. But even then, the past never fully disappeared. Those closest to him knew that Lola's presence still lived quietly in his story. Not as longing, not as regret, but as history, as truth, as the foundation of who he became. Redford never erased that chapter, and Sibylle never asked him to. That's what made this love different. It didn't compete with the past, it respected it. It gave him space to honor who he was, who he lost, and who he still carried with him. As the years passed, Redford stepped further away from acting, choosing directing, mentoring, and preservation instead. He focused on legacy, environmental causes, and protecting independent voices through Sundance. Fame no longer drove him, meaning did. And now, looking back, the picture becomes clear. All the romances, all the heartbreak, all the searching. They weren't random chapters. They were steps leading him home. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive when you're young or chasing dreams. Sometimes it finds you when you finally stop running, when the noise fades, when the ego quiets, when you're ready to be still. Robert Redford thought he understood love early in life, but it took decades, loss, and reflection to truly learn what it meant to stay. She was the artist who didn't even know his name, and that's exactly why it worked. When Sibylla Zegars met Robert Redford in the late 1990s at his Sundance resort, she wasn't starstruck at all. No gasps, no awe, no Hollywood obsession. She didn't see a legend, she saw a man, an artist, a human being, and after a lifetime of being seen as an icon, that moment hit him hard, in the best way. Their connection wasn't built on fame or film credits, it grew through shared passions, nature, creativity, and environmental activism. Sibylle, an acclaimed multimedia artist from Germany, created work rooted in the earth and human emotion. Her world was thoughtful, grounded, and deeply intentional. That energy matched where Redford was in his life more than anything that came before. This wasn't about flash or headlines. It was about alignment, about finally being understood without explanation. In 2009, they married in a private ceremony in Hamburg, far from Hollywood noise. No spectacle, no red carpet, just a quiet commitment built on respect and shared purpose. Together, they founded The Way of the Rain, a nonprofit using art to spark awareness and action around climate change. It wasn't symbolic, it was personal. Redford later said that Sibylle gave him a whole new life, and he meant it. She became his partner in the present, walking beside him with intention and clarity. Still, echoes from his past never fully faded, especially the pain tied to fatherhood and loss. That shadow never disappeared. It lived quietly within him, shaping his choices and his art, and that depth showed up powerfully in his later work. In All Is Lost, Redford played a man alone at sea, fighting to survive. No dialogue, no co-stars, just silence, struggle, and raw emotion. Critics called it one of the finest performances of his career, and for good reason. It wasn't acting for applause, it was reflection on screen. Then he surprised everyone again. He stepped into the role of villain Alexander Pierce in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, later returning briefly in Avengers, Endgame in 2018. It shocked audiences to see him in that space and proved he was still willing to challenge expectations. He announced The Old Man and the Gun would be his final acting role. A smooth, graceful goodbye to a career packed with unforgettable characters. But later, Redford admitted something real. He regretted announcing his retirement. Because the truth was simple. Robert Redford never truly left. He just chose to live differently, with purpose, with passion, and finally, with peace. He's been many things: Oscar winner, icon, activist, artist. But beneath all of that, he's a man who lived boldly and loved deeply. A man shaped by loss, grounded by love, and never finished growing. From losing a son to loving a woman he could never fully forget, to building a legacy that stretches far beyond the screen. His story isn't just Hollywood history. It's a story of resilience, quiet devotion, and truth that refuses to fade. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you felt something real. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories.